What's up guys, how's everybody doing? Today we're going to build a system that many gamers had in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's a Pentium III with a 3DFX Voodoo card. Stay tuned if you're into retro hardware, retro games, or if you just want to hang out with me for a little bit, that would be great too. The BX440 is regarded as the best chipset for the Pentium II and III platform for its compatibility, ruggedness, and overclocking capabilities. These motherboards are pretty cool because they have ISO slots, PCI slots, and an AGP slot for maximum expansion card compatibility, and they are getting increasingly hard to find, especially in good condition. The 8-bit BH6 in this video was acquired a couple of months ago in Brazilian eBay for a bargain of around $7, but with a catch: a bunch of leaked capacitors. This was fixed in the video linked in the card if you're interested in seeing that. So to my luck, the motherboard did come with an I/O shield, but it's not what you would expect from a recently made motherboard. It's not in a chrome style and it doesn't lock in the case cutout like most I/O shields. So the plan is to use pressure and maybe some hot glue to hold it in place. This is a Pentium III 800MHz that has been sitting in a drawer in my old room for about 20 years. Now at the time these were popular, I had a Pentium III 600MHz, so I don't quite remember where I got this one, probably from my years of working in tech support. Now this processor operates at a bus speed of 133MHz and a multiplier of 6. There's an issue here because this motherboard only officially supports up to 100MHz, so I think I'm gonna have to run it at 600MHz, which is fine by me because it's actually what I had at that time. These memory sticks were either used by me or left over from my years of tech support in the early 2000s. There are a few of them ranging from 64 to 128 megabytes, and at this point I'm not sure which ones are working and are compatible with the 8-bit motherboard yet. I was rocking this case on my daily use computer. It's from a repackaging company called Blue Case and it was very cheap, around $25 new. I swapped it recently for a case with a little bit more resources for my daily use PC. I'll link the video here if you're interested in the new Cougar case and the PC swap. This is the Soundblaster Audigy 2ZS. It's from 2003 and I do think it's a bit new for the build, but it was regarded by Phil from Phil's Computer Lab as the best sound card for Windows 98. It ran me down about $20, and at this point you have to remember that back then sound cards did actual sound processing and took a bit of load off the processor. So a good sound card in retro builds can render you some additional performance in heavier games. This is what I consider to be the cherry on top of this build, the 3DFX Voodoo 4 4500. My first 3D accelerator cards were all from 3DFX and I have great memories of gaming on them. I never owned a Voodoo 4 like this one before, but I did get a Voodoo 5 5500 back then, and now they are just too expensive, and my idea of retro builds is to have fun spending very little money. So this was acquired at Brazilian eBay. It's actually the most expensive part of this build. It costs around $90, but being the PCI variant makes it a bit rare, very compatible with older motherboards, and as they are increasingly hard to find, their value will probably go up in time. Well, before we put the P3 build together, there are a few things we need to address, like this dirty CPU cooler. First, just a quick scrub on the heatsink, but I promise the next part will be more interesting as the scrubbing does not help the fan very much. I gave the thing a quick wipe to prevent any more dust getting inside the motor, and now you need to remove the sticker on the back of the fan, and keep in mind that you have to put this or some other sticky thing back here to protect it from dust when you are finished. What holds the fan to the motor is a nylon washer that you can take out with a pair of precision tweezers or a tiny screwdriver, something thin. Now you have to be careful not to ruin the washer because it's going back in there after you're done. So just clean everything as best as possible inside and out, put a drop of some light oil like Singer, and then put everything back together. The fan should be running great again. So always test your builds outside the case before you put them together. It's easier to swap uncompatible and broken parts, and with these retro builds there is a probability that a few things will fail. So here we put everything together on top of the desk, turned the system on for the first boot, and boy oh boy, it booted alright. But there clearly were problems detecting the hard drive and the CD-ROM drive. So I tried all possible configurations of IDE ports, slave and master settings, and then started switching parts. I even managed to get a few new stock IDE cables, but nothing helped with the detection errors. So next things I could do were keep trying new parts, update the BIOS, and finally I could check on the solder I made on the other video when I recapped this motherboard. So I set up the floppy drive on the P4 in the test bench, and I made a boot drive with the latest BIOS and the flashing tool. At first, I had no luck with the flash, receiving a message about a copy protected BIOS. I have never seen that before, but after a quick Google search, I then proceeded to download an earlier version of the award flash utility, and that did the trick. Finally, with the newest BIOS and one of the combinations of CD-ROM drive and hard drive, the system started to boot properly, and I installed Windows 98 SE. The hard drive that did the trick was a Western Digital 40GB hard drive, and the CD-ROM drive is from Sony. Alright, before putting everything in the case, there was a little thing I could do to make things look a bit better with the Voodoo 4 bracket and the motherboard I/O shield. So I soaked them in vinegar to get rid of oxidation and gave them a good clean. This trick made the metal parts look heaps better. I like to start with the low-hanging fruit, so the first thing I'll do is put the PSU in place. This Corsair 450W PSU has been with me for ages. I used it for a bit, then I donated it for my brother, and after quite some time I upgraded his PSU and got this one back. I consider that it has served its time, so by now it's basically a free PSU. What will hold the I/O shield is pressure, so of course there is some tinkering to make it sit in place, but besides that, mounting PC components like this motherboard here has been done the same way for the last 30 years. Basic thing, just take a look if there aren't any standoffs out of place that can cause your motherboard to short out. Now, le creme de la creme, my trusty Voodoo 4. I will have grill style placeholders to go on the empty slots above and below it. I want this thing to get the most ventilation possible. It still has the original heatsink and fan that at some point I'm going to have to address. The hard disk fit a bit weird because the case is modern and the caddy the hard drive goes in was probably not expecting an IDE drive. So the cables were a bit hard to fit within the caddy, but it worked with some fiddling. A good thing about using a modern case is that there's plenty of room for cable management, so you can keep the main compartment of the case clean of cables. That makes it look pretty and maximizes airflow. It's been a while since I last installed a CD-ROM drive, and I realized that in this case, if you want to install a CD-ROM drive, you should install it before the motherboard. Thankfully there was another solution and I didn't have to remove the motherboard. The case store for the drive bay comes out, so that actually wasn't a big deal. Here we installed the Soundblaster Audigy 2 ZS. Unfortunately right now I don't have a CD-ROM audio cable. It transfers CD audio to the sound card so we can play it on the speakers. Back then, some games use CD audio for in-game music. Besides that, installing the sound card is completely straightforward, just stick it in and install the drivers. Now it's finally time to test this beast, and I'll leave you guys with a montage with some of the best games from its era.